Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion today, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience of SmithWeekly, including Sean M., Jeff S., Cindy W., and Mark R. On the program today is a new guest and company joining us. Mr. Cameron Tymstra is on the program. Cameron is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Targa Exploration Corp. The company is focused on gold and lithium exploration in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, Canada. It consists of about 15 projects over 400,000 hectares of grounds, with its main focus on the Opinaca lithium gold exploration project near James Bay, Quebec. The company is listed on the Canadian Securities Exchange under the symbol TEX, as well as on the US OTC markets under the symbol TRGEF. Cameron, welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, it's good to have you on the program, Cameron, for the first time and to introduce the audience to Targa Exploration. Well, to get started here, as you are a new guest, tell the audience a little bit about your background and experience in the junior natural resource sector.
Sure, Andrew. I've been in the mining sector for at least 15 years now, originally as a mining engineer. So I did my background undergraduate degree in mining engineering from the University of Toronto, but I've spent most of my career in mineral exploration in North and South America. So looking for uranium in the Yukon was the first job I ever had, an exploration camp up there. Working as far south as Paraguay, as we were just discussing before the recording there, managing some gold assets in the country there, and kind of everything in between. Doing a little bit of tailings reprocessing as well. I've worked on a couple of those projects, including spending a couple of years in the U.S. at an operating tailings mine. Then after doing a master's in mining management at the South Dakota School of Mines, I was asked to come and run a company for the Inventa Capital Group. We're based out of Vancouver. The company was Tarachi Gold. I'm still CEO over there, but it's just a cash shell at the moment. And I came to join Targa Exploration about a year and a half ago.
Quite a diverse background there on what you said, and appreciate having a fellow uranium person talk a little bit here on the podcast and some of your experience there in the various areas within Canada and, of course, further south into South America there. How do you look at the market today for the juniors as far as conditions and sentiment out there? It's been a quite an interesting year. It's been an interesting couple of years, actually. But how do you see things going forward here, specifically for lithium as well as gold? These are the focus areas of Targa Exploration for the most part. And how do you see the market going into 2025? Do you think it improves here? You see it more stagnant and continuing with bad sentiment? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's certainly been a frustrating year for junior executives like myself. I know kind of across the board, whether it's lithium, gold, or other commodities as well. Particularly the really kind of micro cap or small cap juniors that don't have producing assets, that maybe don't have sort of development stage assets. It's really been a tough market for those companies, and Targa's included. Specifically on the lithium side, we've seen lithium prices come down significantly over the last sort of year and a half from a peak. I mean, we kind of declined at least 80% price wise for that commodity. And that's obviously been very difficult, not just for producers producing it, but, for the juniors trying to raise money to explore for it. So that's obviously been reflected in the share prices of most lithium juniors. But, unfortunately, and somewhat surprisingly, we're seeing, somewhat similar activity in the gold market, despite having, near record high gold prices right now. The majors have benefited from that. The smaller producers have benefited from that. But you really haven't quite seen that benefit trickle down to the early stage explorers. And while our focus is, kind of switched to gold sort of over the last 12 months or so at Targa, it's still difficult for the gold explorers as well, despite these high gold prices. And, it usually takes some time in the gold bull markets for that to kind of trickle down. You start to see kind of money moving into the big names like Newmont, the gold producers, some of the, gold funds first. Then people start to take a look at those kind of mid-tier and junior producers, since they do benefit pretty handsomely from producing gold and selling it at $2,700 an ounce, which we're close to today. But we've at the same time for those majors and those mid-tier producers, we've seen a lot of cost inflation as well. So despite the fact that we have much higher gold prices, the margins haven't necessarily increased, I think, as much as investors in the market would expect to see. We certainly saw Newmont come out with inflated operating costs as well recently. So there's certainly a bit of pressure on the market in general from the operating side as well. So yeah, certainly frustrating. I mean, everyone wants to say, well, 2025 is going to be better, and hopefully we'll continue to see some strong gold prices into the new year, and hopefully then we'll start to see some of that investor interest trickle back down to the gold explorers as well. Obviously we're not making huge gold discoveries or copper discoveries like we used to in terms of major discoveries per year. That's going to put a lot of pressure on the majors and mid tiers to start either doing their own exploration or teaming up with juniors to help them with their exploration to help find those future deposits so they can continue their production levels and growing their production profiles. And we've started to see more of that, at least here in Canada. Recently, sort of the last 6 months or so, we've seen a number of bigger companies sort of partnering at the junior level, usually on the equity side, taking sort of 9.9% stakes. We've seen B2 Gold do that with a couple companies recently. Centerra as well took a piece of one of our partners, Kennerland Minerals, recently. So we're starting to see them participate at the equity level to get exposure to these assets, and hopefully that'll continue kind of trickling down into the junior space.
Certainly agreed with how this starts to play out. It's just a matter of the timing, and you layer on top of the sentiment of some of the issues in the junior capital markets, you layer in the broad market conditions out there. And I think there's a number of matters out there that are unresolved or attention from investors are focused elsewhere. And so we'll have to see how that goes into 2025 as well. Certainly an interesting market. And then on the production side for the majors, see what kind of numbers come out of Barrick and also Agnico Eagle, as well as you well correctly stated, cost escalation is definitely substantial, even with the gold price increase here. So we'll need to see the gold price start to outpace that cost escalation in order to start to see a margin improvement here. So really appreciate that, and looking forward to seeing what happens here in 2025. It should be much more exciting than 2024, I would imagine, given some of the changes out there. Well, why don't we have you give us a quick overview of Targa Exploration, a little on the history of the company, Cam, why you took the lead role at the company, and then we'll jump into a few details.
Yeah, sure. So Targa was incubated out of the Inventa Capital Group, based out of Vancouver. The principals there, Craig Perry and Mike Connert, they've had a lot of success in the industry. Really, the flagship company of that group right now is Vizsla Silver. I think they're inching towards a $1 billion market cap with a very successful silver project they have in Mexico. And they've incubated a number of companies out of that group, and Targa Exploration is one of them. It was originally listed sort of about 2 years ago, so end of 2022. I joined sort of in the spring or summer of 2023. And it was originally brought to market to take advantage of the excitement in the lithium sector at that time. So we basically focused on putting together a portfolio of early stage, sort of prospective lithium assets all across Canada, all within that within the Canadian Shield. We've got very prospective geology for these types of deposits, really from Saskatchewan all the way to the East Coast. So we ended up putting together projects in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. The first of which were 3 projects that we purchased from Kennerland Minerals. For those of you not familiar with them, they're a sort of an explorer and project generator here in Canada. They've been very successful in gold exploration, and they also ended up staking some lithium claims as well. And those are the ones that we picked up from them. So those 3 projects were our Opinaca project, which is currently our flagship asset at Targa, and 2 projects that we have in Manitoba, both of which are historic lithium occurrences. So from there, we started building out large land packages. As you mentioned earlier, we've got roughly 400,000 hectares of ground covered within Canada. A lot of it has had little exploration done on it before, at least until we got there. And we've explored on at least sort of 7 or 8 of those projects over the last 18 months or so. But really, our focus has shifted towards Opinaca, and I'll get into sort of more details on why that is later. But not only were we incubated out of Inventa and supported by that capital group, sort of mid-year towards the end of last year, we also teamed up with Discovery Group. For those of you familiar with big successes like Great Bear Resources and Kaminak Gold, those are the principals behind those big successful companies. So John Robbins and Jim Paterson there. John joined us as an advisor last year. So he sits on our advisory board with Craig Perry and Leo Hathaway. And then Jim Paterson joined us as chairman towards the end of last year. as well. So really, Targa is the first company that has been sort of jointly supported or as a team effort between Inventa Capital and Discovery Group. Those two groups have personally known each other and professionally for a long time, but have never actually worked on a company together. So Targa is really the first time that these sort of two powerhouses have come together to show their support for a single company.
Interesting. Good to know that those groups are behind there. There's a lot of expertise and firepower behind the two groups. The company has a substantial portfolio, so even though lithium may not be the end focus for the company, certainly there's a lot of other opportunity here, as you guys have demonstrated throughout the portfolio of different metals, including gold here. On the capital structure, Cam, cover off the current cash on hand and how far you see that carries the company roughly, and then also current shares outstanding, and then the major shareholders on the roster, and how you and the management team are aligned with the shareholders.
Yeah, so we've got about 103 million shares outstanding at the moment. Those are common shares. We've got about 40 million warrants out as well. The exercise price on those warrants just kind of ranges between 10 cents and 70 cents. I think the average price is about 20 cents or so. So in terms of key shareholders we have here, as I mentioned, the company was founded out of Inventa Capital. So the principals behind that, like Craig and Mike, and some of their kind of key high net worth investors are significant shareholders of the company. Kennerland Minerals, who we purchased our flagship Opinaca from, they own about close to 7.5% of our outstanding shares. We've got funds like Sidex and NQI, which are big Quebec focused funds. Collectively, they own about 7% as well. And then in terms of management, board, and advisors, that group collectively owns about 12% of the outstanding stock. So about 2/3 of the stock in total is kind of held pretty tightly between project vendors, funds, Kennerland Minerals, board management, and some of the high net worth individuals kind of backing the Inventa Capital Group, with about 1/3 held kind of by smaller investors and retail investor level.
And Cam, how do you see the need and timing to do an equity financing into 2025 just to support further exploration? You just talk a little bit about that, and maybe you can give us a little bit of a context on when you might see that happening.
Sure. So we've wrapped up our exploration for 2024. We're just waiting on the last batch of results to come back for our September program, which have already started to roll in. So we should expect to have the rest of those, be able to announce those next week. In terms of cash position, we're sitting on about $250,000 right now. We're expecting a pretty good tax return of around 100 grand sort of in the next month or so. So that'll be enough to carry us forward into the new year. But certainly for next phases of field work, we'll be looking to do a financing to support those. In terms of where we're going to be spending that money, it's pretty much exclusively going to go to the next phases of our Opinaca project. We need to do some geophysics out there, some more work on the ground, in preparation for a future drill program that we'd like to launch at some point in 2025. So certainly will be a need to fund that program sometime in the new year. Be dependent on what these results look like that we're getting back now, and what sort of next phases of work that we have planned. As I said, it's probably going to be some combination of aerial geophysics and ground geophysics and some ground scouting, probably to the tune of a couple $100,000 to support that.
Cam, and we'll jump into that here in a moment, get a little more detail on Opinaca in just a moment. But also, just expand a little bit. You talked about a few folks at the company, but expand a little bit on some of the key people at the company that are supporting you and what they bring to the table.
Yeah, so we've got a great team of advisors. John Robbins from Discovery Group, Craig Perry from Inventa Capital, both geologists. We also have Leo Hathaway on there, a great geologist as well. So those guys bring not only a lot of sort of technical discovery success in the field, but a lot of experience and success in translating discoveries into financial success for shareholders. That's obviously very important. There's a lot of companies sitting on nice assets, big discoveries with tiny market caps. These are people who have been there and successfully created exits for those shareholders. In the case of John Robbins and our chairman Jim Paterson, they were some of the guys behind Great Bear Resources that was purchased for over $1 billion by Kinross a couple of years back. They were also behind Kaminak Gold, which is that big coffee deposit discovery in the Yukon that was purchased by Goldcorp for 400 or 500 million. And Craig and Mike Conrad to the Inventa Capital Group. Big success in the uranium sector, next gen and ISO energy, for example, for Craig Perry and Vizsla Silver for the other guys. So certainly not only great technical people, but people who have that experience and know how to make sure that success in the field translates to success for shareholders.
During 2024, the company has a focus on the newly discovered gold showings at the Opinaca project. Talk about where we are on the status of the project. Recent conclusion of the field program, as you just mentioned there, sounds like results are coming soon. Talk a little bit about where you can, of course, on how you see those results coming out and what your expectations are. And then, of course, plans over the winter time to establish next steps into next year, 2025, to further test those gold targets. And it sounds like perhaps you guys might even be able to go ahead and test one of those targets with a drill bit sometime during 2025. So just cover off those items and where we are presently.
Sure, Andrew. So the background of Opinaca, as I mentioned earlier, we purchased that from Kennerland Minerals. At that time, we purchased it for what we believed was its lithium prospectivity. It sits about 40 kilometers away from the largest pegmatite resource in North America. That's Patriot Battery Metals Corbett deposit. But we liked Opinaca because it had some really interesting lake sediment samples in the government database that were high in things like lithium and cesium and tantalum. And it had historically mapped from the Geological Survey some intrusive bodies that looked very, very similar to the intrusive bodies responsible for the emplacement of that Corbett set of pegmatites. So when we first got on the ground at Opinaca in September of last year, it was really to do a big regional till sampling program. This is a project that no one's ever explored for anything before. It doesn't sit on like a greenstone belt that would be traditionally favorable for things like precious and base metals. It's an area that's just kind of sitting out there that no one ever really bothered to stake or explore for anything before. So very little was really known locally about the project in terms of its geology. We really didn't go out there thinking that it had gold prospectivity either. But of course, when you're taking things like till samples, you sample for the whole suite of elements. And while we did come up with a small lithium anomaly, what was very exciting about Opinaca was the big gold anomaly that we discovered right smack in the middle of the project. That was about a 4 kilometer by 5 kilometer till anomaly. So it's all geochemistry. That prompted us to expand the size of the project from about 42,000 hectares, which is the size that we originally purchased it at, out to 85,000 hectares today, because we didn't know where this geochem anomaly was coming from. Unlike soil samples that are pretty good at representing the base rock that is directly below the source of the soil sample, till gets moved by glaciers. I mean, it was put there sort of on the land after the last ice age when the glaciers were basically scraping across pretty much all of Canada, grinding up the bedrock and transporting that ground up rock many kilometers down ice in the direction that the ice was moving. And when those glaciers melted and receded, all of that material was sort of left sitting on top of the bedrock, but really represents the bedrock that is potentially several kilometers away. So that's one of the reasons why we expanded our territory here, so we could cover all of that up ice ground to make sure that any bedrock source of this gold anomaly that we were seeing was really captured within our mineral claims. So when we went back to the project in June of this year, that was really the first time that we went to Opinaca with the intent of looking for gold. We weren't looking for pegmatites anymore. We really decided that the gold potential here, the size of this anomaly was quite significant relative to sort of other geochem anomalies we've looked at other gold projects within the province and within Ontario. That had the Kennerland team really excited. By the way, we maintain Kennerland Minerals as the project operator for Opinaca for us. So although we own the project 100%, they still are significant shareholders. They own a 3% NSR on the project, but they still operate the project for us. And they're experts in using this till sampling technique to really track down gold deposits. They've been very successful with that in recent years, particularly on one of their projects with Sumitomo Metals, where they made a big high-grade gold discovery there using the same till sampling technique, same team. So we're working with the same people using the same strategy to go out there and really narrow down this large land package, hopefully down to a bedrock source of gold. So after we did that, found that 5 by 4 kilometer anomaly, we went back in and did some infill till sampling and expanded the extents of that grid to try to determine where that anomaly ends up ice to kind of indicate where a potential bedrock source could be. That program was very successful in further delineating this anomaly. We've now tracked it down to be roughly a 7 kilometer east-west trend, and everywhere sort of down ice from that 7 kilometer east-west trend, sort of in the southwest direction, we start to see anomalous values for things like gold and arsenic and other elements that are associated with gold deposits, things like tungsten and some antimony as well. And so not only did we do this geochem sampling, we also went in June and did what we call HMC sampling, or heavy mineral concentrate. which is, again, it's a sample of the till. But what we do is we look for actual gold grains under the microscope. So we don't just send it to a lab for assay. It gets sent to a specialized lab outside of Ottawa, Canada, where they take about 10 kilograms or 25 pounds or so of this material. They sieve it down just to the fine fraction, and they put it on a shaking table, which is a form of gravity concentration. And they concentrate it down just to the heaviest fraction of that sample, which is where all the gold particles will be. And they dry it out, and they actually painstakingly look under the microscope and actually count every single gold grain that is in that concentrate. So not only do we see a gold value from an assay certificate, but we've actually seen a significant number of individual gold grains coming out of the till. And all of those samples that have significant numbers of gold grains, again, are all along this 7 kilometer trend or just down ice from it. So we believe we've really isolated the potential bedrock source. It's pretty obvious to us from this geochem and from the gold grain samples that we've seen that there must be some sort of gold system buried here. Gold doesn't just show up out of nowhere. And the fact that we're not seeing any of these gold grains further in the up ice direction, strongly indicates to us that we've really tracked down the trend where this potential buried system could be. So we're very excited about that. The next stage of work we did was in September. So we wanted to go back and do some infill HMC sampling to take more of these samples, look for more gold grains, and to actually do the first on the ground prospecting program in the target area. So our team was out there for about 10 days or so. We had about 5 or 6 geologists on the ground prospecting. Now, most of this ground is still covered in till. We do see outcrops in certain areas, but other areas outcrop is few and far between. So a lot of the samples that we took out there in September were boulder samples. We took about 300 rock and boulder samples or so, and about another 115 of these HMC samples on a much tighter grid. Again, trying to narrow things down and tighten things up to really hone in on the potential bedrock gold system that we're looking for. So the results of that September program are what we're currently waiting for. We're just starting to see those results come in this week. We should have the rest of them sort of by the end of the week here. So the market can expect to see some results from that next week.
Looking forward to seeing what you guys uncover here on some of these results, and then of course those next steps, and then hopefully sinking a drill into some of this and seeing what kind of results we get out of that in 2025. Just with Quenorland, real quick, just speak to how you see the partnership with them going forward in terms of their operatorship of this project, and if that would continue. And then also, given the portfolio size, Cam, what would your guys' appetite be to continue working with them on some of the other portfolio projects, or would that be something you guys would be handling on your own? Just talk a little bit about that relationship.
Yeah, so we've got a great relationship with them. We don't have to continue working with them as project operator. It's something that we choose to do. We choose that because they have a fantastic in-house technical team. Not only that, but they do a lot of this field work on projects all across Quebec and Ontario. They contract a lot of field crews, field equipment, helicopters, things like that, really for like the full season. So they can deploy those across their own portfolio projects as well as the projects that they're working on, like ours at Opinaca. So they can negotiate better rates for helicopter time. They can negotiate better rates for field crews. They can kind of make better use of mobilization, demobilization when they're working on other projects that are close by. So we do pay them a small management fee to do that for us as a percentage of our expenditures. But given the fact that they can likely get those expenditures for much lower than what we could as a single operator that's just working for a few weeks at a time, since they can hire crews for the full summer, that more than makes up for the fact that we pay them a 10 or 15% management fee. So we really like to continue working with them. We're certainly going to be working with them into 2025. They'll likely be running our maiden drill program at some point next year as well. And we have a technical committee that's kind of based on a few of our members and a few of their members. They propose the sort of work that they think that we should do sort of as a next step, and we kind of negotiate back and forth on what we'd actually like to do and what we'd actually like to budget and put towards the project, and kind of go from there. So that's been working really, really well for us ever since we started working with them last September. We're certainly going to be doing that going forward. They've now executed 3 successful programs for us that were on time and under budget, and we're going to look forward to continuing working with them in the future. In terms of other assets that we have, most of the work that we've done on our other projects has not been with Quenorland Minerals. They're really only project operator for the 3 projects that we purchased from them. They did coordinate some sort of First Nations negotiations that we did in Manitoba on those projects, as well as some aerial geophysical surveys that we did over there. The other projects that we have, we did a lot of that work with our own in-house team. We've got two great geologists on our side as well. Jeremy Pfister, who's got a PhD in lithium pegmatite geology, so he's kind of our point man for a lot of the lithium exploration that we've done in the past at Targa. In terms of what we'll be doing next year, though, I mean, really right now, our focus is going to be at Opinaca. We did a little bit of work on a few projects earlier this year, mostly just to kind of keep them in good standing. But most of the investors that are looking at Targa right now and those that we raised money from in March to fund these programs this year really wanted to see that money go towards making a gold discovery at Opinaca. So because of that, we've got quite a few other projects in the portfolio that we've done some work on. We may look to try to monetize those in some way, either spin them out or find other parties that are interested in perhaps purchasing or optioning some of those. A few of the projects that we did explore on that we think are maybe less prospective for lithium now do have some potential for other commodities. So we'll be taking a closer look at some of that and what those opportunities might be over the course of the winter to decide if we're going to head out to those properties next year or not, or try to repurpose them as a exploration for a different commodity. One example is one of our projects in Quebec, where we were obviously looking for lithium last year, but there's a number of mafic dikes on there, and an adjacent claim has a couple samples that came back high for things like copper, nickel, and PGEs. But we have a lot of sort of unmapped and untested mafic material on the project that could also be prospective for that. So that's just kind of one example of some of the avenues that we're looking at to monetize some of those other assets while we kind of focus our own in-house spending at Opinaca.
I want to talk just a little bit more about some of the other projects in a moment and get some of your thoughts on maybe some of the secondary focus projects out there. But for some context for the audience, the focus on the project, of course, is gold at Opinaca. In that area, in that region, talk about maybe some viable deposits that are nearby that are comparable, or an existing mine in the area that's maybe just give us a comparable in terms of maybe what that production profile looks like at that existing mine, just to get some high level idea of potential in the area.
Yeah, so where we are directly has never been explored for anything before. The closest gold occurrences really occur along the contact between the Opinaca geological subprovince, which our project is named for, and the La Grande subprovince. And that boundary is very close to the eastern edge of our project, but is probably about 20 kilometers or so away from our main anomaly in the center of the project. Usually, gold deposits associated with that kind of boundary are a little bit closer to the boundary than where we are. So if you want to look for potential analogs to what we're looking for at Opinaca, because we don't yet know what type of gold deposit we're looking for, we have not found the bedrock source yet. But the Eleanor gold mine is really the closest mine to us. It also sits kind of along the subprovincial boundary between the Opinaca and the La Grande. Eleanor is currently owned by Newmont. It produces about 250,000 ounces of gold per year. And sort of the life of the resources that have been found there has been close to about 7 or 8 million ounces of gold in that deposit. But it's not the only standalone deposit there. There's the Chichu deposit that I believe Sirius Resources owns. Fury Gold Mines also owns a deposit, both of which are just a little bit to the southeast of Eleanor and a little bit closer to that sort of the Opinaca geological province that we're in. Due to the fact that that mine is there and those other known deposits are there historically, there's been a lot more exploration in that area. And a lot of gold showings have been found within the Opinaca subprovince in that area as well. And so that's probably more similar to the sort of style of gold deposit we may be looking for. Things that are in very high metamorphic grade environments like we are at Opinaca with local igneous intrusions. Those are sort of things that we're looking for in that area. So while there hasn't been a lot of like gold deposits, there's certainly no gold mines sort of on our side of it. If you flip over to the other side again, about 140 kilometers away, that's where you're going to find the Eleanor mine and where a lot more exploration has been done historically. Newmont is currently looking to sell the Eleanor gold mine along with several other of their Canadian mines. They've sort of drawn a line around the 400 or 500,000 ounce per year production, and sort of everything above that they consider tier one that they want to keep, and anything below that they want to sell. So Eleanor, along with I think at least two other mines in Ontario, they're currently on the sale block, and it'll be interesting to see who comes in and purchases Eleanor. Because that could certainly renew some exploration interest in the area. Historically, it was owned and operated by Goldcorp until they were acquired by Newmont. Goldcorp was interested in exploration in the area and took stakes in some of the local mine explorers as well to try to look for other feed for Eleanor. We think that once that sale is made and we know who's going to be owning that, we could potentially see some renewed interest in gold exploration in that area.
Cam, thank you for that. That's good to know. with this, I know lithium is not the exact focus here for the company, but it is still part of some of the work that may be done in the future. But just talk a little bit about lithium in this area, lithium mining in the region generally, as far as operating mines, as well as what you see makes a good lithium project in the area in terms of size and scale. Perhaps a comparable for the audience to hear about is the Corvette lithium deposit that is to the north of Opinaca. Just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, Corvette, that's Patriot Battery Metals' big deposit. That is the largest lithium pegmatite deposit in North America. It's currently still undergoing sort of feasibility stage. I believe they released a PEA earlier this year. They're still drilling heavily on that area. It's a very long trend that they have. I mean, the main part of the deposit is just sort of one little piece of their claim block. It's a very long trend, and they've been discovering lithium pegmatites for at least sort of 10 or 15 kilometers along that trend. So it's certainly a very well endowed area on the lithium side of things. To the east of our project is the Adina lithium project. I think they recently purchased the old Renard diamond mine, which is a little ways to the south, planning to sort of develop that lithium asset while using the diamond mine's old processing facilities and infrastructure. We've got the Cansat lithium deposit a little bit to the northwest of us as well. So pretty heavy area in terms of lithium discovery and known lithium deposits for Canada. Certainly one of the biggest ones in the country. We don't quite sit on that main sort of green belt trend that most of those occur in, but what we do have are very similar igneous intrusions from the same suite. It's called the Vieux Comptoir suite of granite intrusives within the Opinaca project that we see up in those. So we still haven't seen lithium bearing pegmatites yet on the property. But again, since we're going to be focused on gold exploration for Opinaca, we won't be spending too much time looking for lithium there. We really think the gold potential is what's exciting about this project. In terms of other lithium assets in the portfolio, as I said, we've got a few projects in Manitoba that have historically, spodumene and lepidolite and other lithium minerals discovered on them. Those are a little bit more on the remote side, a little bit more sensitive with respect to First Nations and environmental concerns there. We haven't been on the ground on those projects yet. We've just mostly been doing sort of aerial reconnaissance for geophysics and orthophotography, looking at what we might want to do there as a first step on the ground potentially in the next year or two, or looking for others who are interested in exploring those assets.
Sounds like an interesting area. It looks like there's a lot of potential for future production within this region on lithium. We talked just a little bit about some of the other projects here, and I want to just discuss that briefly here again. The company does have quite a few other projects in the portfolio, Superior, Slim Jim, Sky Lakes, Detour West, Lake Shore, White Metal, Leaf River, and many more. And of course, many of them are beyond lithium and just gold. At least one of them has potential for uranium, among other metals. Just cover the most important project or two, Cam, that you would see that you guys would retain in the portfolio at the company to progress in parallel to Opinaca, as well as any plans that you would see in 2025 to do some work on those next important focus projects.
Yeah, outside of Opinaca, I mean, we've got two assets that we acquired at the very beginning of this year. That's Harikana and Pegmatite Beach. Those projects are ones that we have not had an opportunity to visit yet. But I know our geology team is certainly chomping at the bit to get on the ground there, not just to look for the potential for lithium pegmatites, but for other minerals as well. There's certainly some potential for some gold on both of those projects. So we'd like to get on there to kind of better assess not just the lithium potential, but what the potential is there for some other elements as well. Prince Albert Lake in northern Saskatchewan is one that we did visit this year. Our geology team spent about a week up there. It's quite interesting. We think it remains quite prospective for lithium pegmatites. There are spodumene bearing pegmatites about 20 kilometers to the west of us, kind of within the same greenstone belt that crosses our property. And just a little bit sort of in the down ice direction from us, a couple kilometers, some lithium bearing boulders have historically been found, but no one's ever found the bedrock source for that. So we really like that project up there. There's certainly some gold potential in that greenstone belt as well. So really those projects that have multi-element potential will be the ones that we'd like to continue working on.
And it's good to have those couple projects there that can be looked at, and you guys are continuing to evaluate those, and having a pipeline here makes some sense aside from the core project, which will be the focus in the immediate term. Just on community work and provincial government relations, Cam, to progress these projects, obtain exploration permitting, talk about company work to inform community about the importance and responsibility of mineral exploration and extraction, utilization of local service providers, and of course, that small effort that can be done as a small exploration junior like Targa to encourage local government and community support. to support the work in the exploration segment of the market, which of course is important. But just talk about some of the things you guys are doing there, Cam, to improve those relationships, educate, which I think is very, very lacking worldwide on mineral extraction and the importance. But just talk a little bit about some of the work you guys are doing there and the efforts with the community.
Stakeholder relations is incredibly important to us. It really should be for every management team. It should always be top of mind. It's not that hard to go out of your way a little bit to really be inclusive and take the other stakeholders' concerns into considerations. I mean, for people like me who live in a big city, we don't have mines popping up in our backyards. But for people who live closer to these more remote areas and where mines are being developed, it certainly plays a much bigger role and bigger concern for those communities having mines nearby that impact, their access to water, their access to hunting grounds, their access to fishing grounds. So it's really important to us to reach out to those communities, usually before we even go into the field, to hear what those concerns are, introduce ourselves. As you said, education is really important. So it's always important to us to educate them on what sort of work we're going to be doing, what potential impacts there could be on the environment, what things we do to mitigate those impacts as well. So that education piece is very, very important. And also just making sure that the lines of communication are established and open to make sure there's no sort of crossed lines or miscommunication or misunderstanding there that could potentially lead to some animosity or some tension between operating companies and local communities. Since those local communities are the ones that are really bearing the brunt of the sort of project level and environment level related risks to projects, much more so than investors and management teams that are living in faraway places. It's important to make sure that any benefits that can come out of a project get directed at least as much as possible to members of those communities. And at early stages of exploration, that can be employment opportunities. So if we're looking for people to help us in the field, people to help us establish exploration camps, to help us work in the field, if we can get opportunities to kind of educate them as well and team them up with our geologists, for example. We're always looking to create those opportunities for local community members. And on the business side of things, if we're spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on a program, we'd like to see as much of that money flow to local business operators as we can. So whether that's local outfitters, local service providers, whether that's providing a bulldozer, an excavator to help us kind of clear and set up a camp, or it's people who are providing local lodging and food services and things like that. We always try to hire local and supposed to try to bring in crews and bringing in service providers from other parts of the province or outside of the province. So working with Kennerland, they're on board with that as well. So they're always making sure that the operators and subcontractors that they work with, to the extent that we can anyway, help support those businesses and individuals in those local communities.
Cam, thank you very much for that and appreciate your guys' efforts. Although, of course, small for a small junior, they all very much count and add up. So I appreciate that. And of course, as the work progresses, you guys will continue to ramp up those efforts as well. So thank you for the comments, and always great to see folks work with community on those educational initiatives and the importance of mining. I think that's very important this day and age. Well, Cam, short of any other things that you want to add here, let's leave it there for now, and I'll leave you with just our wrap-up questions here. For potential investors who are listening in, the company has a market capitalization of about 4.8 million Canadian dollars. Why should Targa Exploration be considered within the institutional, family office, and retail investors' portfolio at this stage?
Well, as I mentioned before, we've seen some movement in the larger cap size of the gold sector. We haven't really seen that movement in the junior side. I really think that movement is sort of not too far down the road right now, particularly when we're seeing continued strength in the precious metal prices. So I think having some exposure to the junior side is really important. Typically, when gold prices are high and momentum is moving north, the multiplier or the potential returns are usually much greater in these smaller size companies, particularly those that are poised to make a discovery. If you want to look at the Lassonde curve, for example, the fastest and highest returns within that curve are typically going to be at during the discovery process. And for Opinaca project and Targa as a whole, we're very much at that pre-discovery phase. We've got fantastic looking data right now, indicating to us that there is a buried gold system somewhere here. What that gold system looks like, we don't know yet. I mean, discoveries are really made with the drill bit, not necessarily with rock samples and things like that. So with the drill program likely kicking off at some point next year, kind of getting in on the ground level. While, like you said, our stock is very cheap right now. market cap of around 5 million Canadian. There's a lot of potential upside if we are successful in making a discovery here. And I think people who are interested in precious metals and getting exposures to that, while they may want to focus on some of the majors and mid tiers because they're lower risk, certainly sprinkling in some exposure at the junior and pre-discovery side, I think is important. Can really help accelerate returns in a strong gold market.
Agreed. And Cam, for those interested, what is the best way for investors and other interested parties to contact the company?
Yeah, I mean, certainly reaching out to me directly at Cameron at targaexploration.com. You can certainly visit our website at targaexploration.com as well. We can be found trading on the CSE under the ticker TEX, and in the US on the OTCQB market under the ticker TRGEF.
Well, Cameron, really appreciate the introduction to Targa. Best of luck in the coming months with progress at the company, and looking forward to seeing what happens with the company and those results in 2025. And of course, looking forward to having you come back to update at that time.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and look out for the results we should have back in the next week or two. And looking forward to catching up again.